A frail grandmother inches a trembling teacup toward her lips, tea lovingly poured by her own daughter-in-law. Through the window, she glimpses her son sprinting across the yard, panic blazing in his eyes. He crashes into the kitchen, shatters the silence and the porcelain, knocking the cup from her hand. The liquid meant to soothe hisses like acid on the carpet, filling the room with the stench of betrayal. Breathless, he locks eyes with his mother and chokes out the unthinkable. "Mom, my wife just tried to poison you." Dear friends, your comments mean the world to us. Like this video and right where you are watching us from, we will be happy to send you our regards. Sometimes poison hides in a smile as sweet as Sunday peach pie. 6 months ago, a clot rearranged the geography of my body, and the left side of me never came fully back online. Now I roll instead of walk, living in my son Damien's split level on the west side of Atlanta, where magnolias press their faces against the porch screens like gossiping neighbors. The doctors call me Gloria Grace. The choir at Greater Covenant still calls me Sister Glow. Either way, I'm 72, 2 decades widowed, and stubborn enough to catalog every creak of this borrowed house the way psalmists memorize God's promises. At dawn, the ceiling fan chops the humid air into lazy quarters while I study its blades. They remind me of a merry-go-round, always spinning, always fixed. I used to be the one who spun, running 2 branches of grace tailoring, hemming dreams for debutantes and deacons alike. Now the circus has shrunk to a bedroom painted sage green by Stacy, my daughter-in-law, who declared the color calming. Perhaps it calms her guilt. It does nothing for mine. Damien's morning ritual follows a metronome. Shoes in the hallway at 6 a.m., kettle whistle at 6:05, front door sigh at 6:20 as he leaves for his job with Marta Maintenance. He kisses the top of my gray twist out and murmurs, "Be good, Ma." He never waits for my answer. If you could taste the air in that hallway, you'd know it carried a flavor I wouldn't recognize until it was almost too late. With Damien gone, Stacy's heels clack like hostile Morse code from upstairs. She appears in the doorway, silk robe belted tight enough to strangle a secret. She checks her watch, not me. "Breakfast in 5. Try not to. Spill anything." Her lashes flutter, batting away whatever decency might crawl across her conscience. I watch her glide toward the kitchen, and for a moment sunlight catches the gold ring on her hand, my late husband's ring, resized to fit her finger the day Damien proposed. It was meant to be temporary, a symbol until Damien could buy his own. Somehow temporary turned permanent, the way mold takes root if no one lifts the floorboards. An hour later, Stacy pushes a tray across my lap. Oatmeal, 1 poached egg, a cup of rose-hip tea. "Herbal's better for blood pressure," she says, voice bright as artificial sweetener. I whisper grace, sip, and taste bitterness lingering beneath the hibiscus. But I swallow anyway, because what mother suspects malice from her own child's wife? The fan keeps circling overhead, slicing the morning into seconds too thin to grasp. Somewhere in that motion, I feel the smallest crack widen, like a cup hairline fracturing under slow heat. And cracks, baby, always travel. Have you ever sat so still you could hear secrets settling in the dust? That's how Tuesday began. I wheeled myself onto the back deck while Stacy roared away in her cherry red Lexus, the car Damien could never quite afford alone. The August heat draped itself over my shoulders, less burden than the silence she left behind. Cardinals warbled among dogwood branches. Somewhere a lawnmower whined like a distant accusation. I thought about the house I'd signed over to Damien years earlier, back when arthritis first nibbled my knuckles and stairs grew steeper each season. The deed sits in a safety deposit box downtown, joint ownership until I pass. A sensible arrangement, or so my attorney claimed. Yet last night, drifting toward sleep, I heard Stacy on the phone, her voice leaking through the vent. "The appraisal's nearly $450. Once it's ours free and clear, we can refinance the Lexus, maybe flip this dump and move north." She didn't know. I was awake. She didn't know my heart kept meticulous notes. I closed my eyes against noon glare and let memory run its fingers through my hair. Damien, 5 years old, carrying a mixing bowl bigger than his chest. Me teaching him to fold butter into biscuit dough without punching out the tenderness. That same boy now works double shifts and apologizes for being tired. I wonder if he sees the fault lines in his marriage or if love blinds him the way stroke blurred my left field of vision. Stay with me, because the moment I finally looked directly at those fault lines, the ground beneath all of us began to tremble. Inside, the grandfather clock, my father's, gonged 2 solemn notes. I rolled back to my room, noticing an acrid scent curling under the door from the kitchen. Burnt? No, chemical, like nail polish remover heated on a stove. The tea kettle whistled, sharp and urgent. I couldn't stand to investigate, so I prayed instead, Lord, let foolishness stumble over its own feet before it reaches my lips. 5 minutes later, Stacy returned, carrying grocery bags. She bustled, humming off-key to the radio while dumping freezer dinners into drawers. When she finally poured my afternoon tea, the cup trembled against its saucer, her hand, not mine, shaking. I noticed. She noticed me noticing, and for the first time, fear crossed her face like a cloud covering the sun. Then it was gone, and she was sunshine again, yet cracks, once visible, refused to vanish. A teacup is a circle, but circles can be cages if you stare long enough. Friday evening, Damien called to say he'd be working late overtime. Stacy served dinner alone. Salmon croquettes too salty, collards under-seasoned. She stared at my untouched plate. Something wrong with your appetite? Her tone could slice burlap. My taste buds acting obstinate tonight, I replied, folding napkin over fork. The wheelchair's brakes squeaked as I backed away from the table. Stacy's smile looked carved, not grown. Later, she rolled me to the living room window so I could watch cicadas smash themselves against porch light. She brewed another pot of rose hip and set an empty cup beside me. I'll bring yours once it steeps. From the hallway, I heard cupboards opening, closing, then that same faint chemical note, like almonds soaked in window cleaner. I wheeled closer to the threshold, listening. Her voice drifted out, whispering, 2 drops is plenty. She's frail as mothwing. The hair on my arms lifted. A congregation standing for benediction. I reversed fast, nearly bumping the credenza, and parked by the piano where Damien's childhood photos lined the top. One pictured him at 13, science fair ribbon pinned to his shirt. Back then, he tested water quality, labeling jars with skull and crossbones if toxins rose too high. My boy understood danger. Would he understand this? The kitchen door creaked. Stacy emerged carrying 2 cups. The liquid in mine shimmered ruby under lamplight. She extended it, eyes glittering like polished hematite. Careful, it's hot. I accepted, hand steady despite the drum in my chest. Before porcelain met my lips, the front door burst open. Damien, grease-stained coveralls, sweat streaking his forehead, sprinted across hardwood. With a shout, he slapped the cup away. Crimson arcs sprayed across the white rug like sunset hemorrhaging. "Mom, don't drink," he roared. The cup shattered, steam hissing. Stacy shrieked, dropped hers, then spun toward the sink as if distance could erase intent. Damien wheeled on her. "What did you put in that tea?" She stammered, "Rose hips. Antioxidants." But I smelled the truth rising from shards, bitter almonds, the scent of betrayal distilled. Damien's eyes flicked to me. I had the lab run tests on the leftover leaves from Tuesday. "Cyanide compounds, Ma. She's trying to kill you for the house." The room went preternaturally still, like the hush before a sanctuary confession. Glass pieces glimmered at our feet, stars fallen out of order. And in that silence, Stacy's next word would decide whether forgiveness could outrun poison or whether the cracks had already swallowed us whole. "What do you think?" she said. Stacy's silence landed like a dropped blade, humming even after it kissed the hardwood. She opened her mouth, but the only sound was the soft fizz of tea cooling on the rug. Damien's pulse hammered his temple, a visible metronome, and the wheelchair vibrated with my own heartbeat. My son waited for confession. His wife weighed the cost of honesty. In that breath, I tasted two futures, one where truth poured out like dirty dishwater and one where it curdled into something deadly. She chose a third road, flight. Stacy bolted for the back door, scattering porcelain beneath her heels. Damien lunged, caught only a fistful of silk robe, and the seam ripped with a scream of fabric too human. I wheeled after them, momentum bouncing the chair across thresholds, because if she reached the Lexus, she would turn our story into rumors we'd never outrun. Outside, cicadas shrieked their summer sermon while the porch light flickered, making the yard look like a stage awaiting curtains. The car roared to life. Headlights slashed our silhouettes across the siding. Damien pounded on the window. She threw the gear into reverse, tires spraying gravel. For one terrifying second, the bumper skimmed my calf. Heat spilled from the exhaust like revenge made visible. Then, the car fishtailed down Magnolia Drive, taillights pulsing a warning nobody could yet read. Damien collapsed on the wet gravel, chest heaving. The neighborhood watched from behind curtains drawn by scandal's glow. I steadied my voice. Panic was a luxury I could no longer afford. "Call Detective Lytle," I told him. "He still owes me for hemming his mama's choir robe." My son nodded, fingers smudged with tea and fear. While he dialed, I riffled Stacy's forgotten purse on the porch rocker and found a vial no bigger than lipstick, half full of amber liquid, pharmacy stamped. Beneath it lay a printout, instructions for dissolving amygdalin tablets to release hydrogen cyanide. Sirens approached, blue lights reflecting in the vial like tiny funerals. Little arrived, gray-bearded, smelling of barbecue and night shifts, bagged the evidence, promised a bolo. Hours later, the cruiser's taillights vanished and the house felt cavernous, every chair estranged. Damien brewed coffee we wouldn't drink and paced between fridge and sink, his footsteps squeaking guilt across linoleum. "If she pawned Dad's ring for cyanide," he began, but I cut in. "A ring can be remade, a life can't." Rain started to drum on the roof, slow and deliberate, like a jury taking seats. The evening breeze whispered that this rupture was only the overture, and anyone who thought they'd heard the last note would soon discover how quiet a house can become when poison decides to play a second movement. Morning tiptoed in on cat feet, and with it came headlines. News vans parked outside at 7 and Tenny tasting scandal. While officers inventoried the kitchen, Little pulled Damien aside. I caught fragments: financial motive, insurance, credit card debt, each phrase knotting around my son's shoulders. He returned pale. They traced a $50,000 wire from Stacy to Panama Ma. 3 weeks after you moved in, I forced down cinnamon toast seasoned with resilience. "She'll surface to spend it," I said. Greed loves daylight. We spent the day handing detectives timelines, emails, the vial, shredded phone bills Damien dredged from the trash. By twilight they left, leaving casseroles of questions from well-meaning neighbors. Then Damien's phone buzzed. Stacy, in what looked like a motel room, mascara artfully smeared, spun a tale for social media. A senile mother-in-law, a violent husband. "If anything happens to me," she whispered to millions, "remember this recording." Doubt spread faster than truth can sprint. I closed my eyes, letting her voice dissolve. We were no longer fighting for my life. We were fighting for the story that would outlive all of us. Night settled heavier than before. We barricaded doors with symbolism more than wood, yet sleep refused us. After midnight, the power went out. Street, house, everything. The generator refused to breathe. Candles trembled like guilty children caught awake. An engine idled outside, then cut. Footsteps squished across soaked grass. A silhouette paused at the window, broad-shouldered, definitely not Stacy. Metal-scraped glass, a whine that curled my spine. Damien gripped the fireplace poker. 4 deliberate knocks rattled the door. A voice, low and unfamiliar, slid through. "Deliver the old woman and the deeds stay clean." Retreating steps. Engine revving. Retreating. Dawn revealed fresh tire tracks and acid-etching powder on the pane. Intimidation. Little said. Yet intimidation can backfire. Every knock merely announced that the siege had truly begun. By midday, detectives traced Stacy's motel. SWAT found it empty save for one feather from her robe. Cameras caught her boarding a truck south on I-75. The chase had gone interstate, and anyone still watching felt tomorrow's headline tighten like a drum. Storms rarely visit once. The second strike is usually sharper. Out there, in that swelling hush before thunder, something moved that wanted more than property. Something patient, willing to wait until even candle stubs surrendered. The second night without Stacy, thunder rattled windows until the grandfather clock chimed in sympathy. Waiting is its own kind of poison. Tasteless, odorless, lethal in sufficient quantity. Stay with me, because the next strike landed before thunder's echo crawled back under the sky. At 10:30, Little called. The truck driver had dropped her in Valdosta. She'd bought a burner phone and vanished. Stacy's map was global now, but her goal stayed local. Erase the witness to her greed. Minutes later, an email arrived from Covenant Angel, attaching a grainy photo of me asleep an hour earlier. Tick-tock, it read. Deliver the deeds or her heart stops. Dread weaponized midnight. Power failed, the generator sputtered on. Camera feeds lit Damien's laptop. 1:17 a.m. Side gate swung. A poncho-clad figure aimed a garden sprayer at the HVAC intake. Damien dashed outside before I could stop him. On screen, mist burst as he tackled the prowler. Malathion! He rasped inside moments later. Paramedics said he'd live. His lungs had tasted fire but refused to burn. Stacy's purse still mocked me from the rocker. I gripped it. If she craved paperwork, she could bargain with the woman who signed it. At the ICU, Damien lay sedated, chest rising beneath tubing. Little handed me an envelope postmarked 3 months earlier, rezoning plans tripling my property's value. Greed had coordinates at last. I tore the letter into confetti, signing subpoenas with trembling resolve. Social feeds exploded. Some claimed I framed Stacy, others that Damien staged poison for sympathy. Lies bred like mold in damp shadow. I shut the phone. Survival is a narrative best told by the living. A disguised voice rang my mobile. Last chance, Gloria. Sign tonight or bury your son tomorrow. The line died, leaving monitors ticking heartbeats like fuses. Corridor lights dimmed, painting doorways with shadows. Somewhere within those shadows, a plan began stitching itself, needle, thread, and a resolve no toxin could pierce. Ready to sow daylight back into my son's future, even if hemming my own ending shut was the price. Morning climbed the hospital blinds too slowly for my taste, brushing pale gold across Damien's bandaged face. Machines whispered through plastic lungs, protesting every rise of his chest. Yet the beat inside him kept good time. I rested one veined hand on the blanket and listened. Every son's heart has a song only his mother can hear. When that tempo falters, a mother becomes conductor, drummer, and trumpet all at once. Anything to keep the music alive. Outside, reporters circled like buzzards denied fresh carrion. Their headlines had crowned me queen of cyanide even before a judge could clear his throat. I needed a louder story, one that roared truer than the lies Stacy had loosed into the ether. So I slid my phone across the tray, tapped go live, and spoke straight into the lens. No ombre filter today, folks, just an old woman who survived peach pie poisons and nightshade tea. My name is Gloria Grace, and if you're hearing my voice, you're part of the jury that counts. I told them about the deed, the ring, the wire to Panama. I showed the vial Detective Lytle had photographed. I even held up the torn rezoning letter like scripture. Then I leaned close until the camera fogged. Keep watching. I promised, soft as a hymn yet edged like a razor. Justice needs witnesses, and you, yes, you scrolling between ads, are about to see whether greed fears daylight. By dusk, the stream had sown itself across timelines faster than gossip at a funeral potluck. Hashtags bloomed, hashtag sip with Gloria, hashtag house. That poison built, donations to Damien's medical fund shot past $15,000 in an hour. Truth, it turns out, craves audience the way hunger craves bread. But even theater lights cast shadows. An anonymous account messaged, "Not enough witnesses to save the boy twice." Attached was a photo of my sewing studio, locked since the stroke, now ransacked, bolts of fabric bruised on the floor. The intruder had left one thing untouched. My husband's tailor shears, blade open, pointing north like a compass, hungry for blood. I closed the phone, tasted iron on my tongue. Every threat carries a signature. This one smelled of Stacy's perfume and somebody else's brawn. The night nurse noticed my pallor, offered Ativan. I declined. Clarity would be my sharpest needle tonight. Somewhere down the corridor, wheels squealed, orderlies shifting a critical patient. I followed that sound in my mind until it morphed into rubber on wet asphalt, headlights carving the dark, a Lexus skidding toward another line we'd all pretend not to see. And just like that, speculation became prophecy. Stacy wasn't content to whisper danger anymore. She wanted it to stand center stage and bow. Just before midnight, a text pinged. "Trade deeds for son, loading dock." 1 hour. No sender ID, only the timer icon ticking towards silence. I stared at Damien. Tubes, tape, the soft thunder of a life forced to lie still. Then I looked at my hands. They trembled, yet they still remembered every stitch they had ever set. Somewhere between those two truths, a plan began to breathe. And a mother who has already tasted poison does not fear the flavor of daring. I wheeled downstairs, clipboard across my lap, hospital gown fluttering behind like half-finished wings. Security guards blocked the elevator to the loading docks. Liability policy, they said. I quoted scripture with a smile sharp enough to part oceans and sailed past them on a wave of righteous momentum. The dock smelled of diesel and last week's rain. A single delivery truck idled. Backlift lowered like an open jaw. Inside the gloom, a silhouette waited. Broad shoulders, ball cap, stance of a man accustomed to being paid in cash and silence. I rolled up until the brake of my chair clicked. "You're early," I said, voice steady as chalk on slate. He tilted his head. "Where's the paperwork? Where's the proof of life?" My question fluttered into the loading bay looking for a perch. A rear door opened. Stacy stepped out. No mascara this time, only raw ambition etched across cheekbones sharp enough to slice moonlight. She held a tablet streaming Damien's room in real time. Monitors beeping, nurse charting. "Touch a nurse call button," she warned, "and the feed goes dark forever." The hired man reached for the clipboard. I let him see notarized copies of the deed, public records Lytle had printed for me 30 minutes earlier, every transferable line carefully whited out. I needed them to believe the prize lay beneath the correction tape. "The originals wait in my safety box," I lied. "Sign a release clearing my son of any charges and guaranteeing his protection, and I'll give you the key location." Stacy laughed, a brittle clatter that reminded me of teacups dropped in Chapter 1. "You think we trust you?" My answer slid from a deeper place than trust. "I'm a mother. Promises are the only currency we're born with. Breaking them bankrupts the soul." For a sliver of time, her eyes dimmed. Guilt or a memory she hadn't invited. The husk of that feeling made room for the thing I planted next, uncertainty. I continued, gentle as linens folded for Sunday service. "What you really want isn't a house, Stacy. You want freedom from the fear that you'll never own something that loves you back. But deeds don't love. People do." Her jaw twitched. "Spare me the sermon." The muscle in the hired man's neck knotted. Greed hates delay. He snatched the clipboard and triggered a razor-thin wire I'd stitched into the spring clip. A pen cap flew, pepper spray payload venting full force. He reeled, blinded. I jammed the wheelchair joystick, ramming Stacy's knee. She yelped, tablet skidding across concrete. The camera feed tilted but kept rolling. Nurses now stared, alarmed. I snatched the tablet, thumbed the panic icon Lytle had installed. Hospital lockdown sirens wailed, steel doors slammed. Tires squealed as the truck roared backward, driver stumbling half blind. Guards burst through access gates, tasers drawn. Stacy limped toward the lot, but the nurse from Damien's floor, big-shouldered former Marine, intercepted her with a restraint hold, neat as hospital corners. Before cuffs clicked, Stacy locked eyes with me, fury swirling with something sadder. "You ruined us," she hissed. "No, darling," I whispered so only she could hear. "You sewed this hem yourself." I merely pulled the thread blue lights painted the night again, yet the color felt different now, as if justice itself had changed bulb wattage. Still, every triumph demands payment. As paramedics cleared pepper spray, I caught Damien's monitor feed blinking red, heart spikes. He was waking into pain, into headlines, into consequences none of us could yet name, and the final stitch of my plan had one more seam to tighten. Dawn cracked open like an egg over frying asphalt. Press crowded the ER foyer, microphones thirsting for statements. Detective Lytle emerged first, recounting charges, attempted murder, conspiracy, aggravated assault with chemical agent. They cheered his sound bites, but I saw the fatigue in his shoulders. Evil never clocks out. It simply changes shift. Back upstairs, Damien woke, voice rasped into the oxygen mask. "Is it over?" I squeezed his hand. The storm's eye passed, but the clouds haven't spent themselves. Because even with Stacy in custody, public opinion had become its own poison, one that seeps slow, stains permanent. The hospital PR team advised silence. I chose song. At noon, I returned to my live feed, holding that same porcelain teacup, hairline crack now sealed with bright gold lacquer. Kintsugi, the Japanese art of mending with precious metal. Scars displayed, not hidden. I told watchers how broken things can guard treasure. I read Psalm 147. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. And I let them see the cup's new beauty gleam. Midstream, a notification pinged. The bank had flagged my late husband's ring. Stacy had pledged it for bail, but asset seizure froze the transaction. She would await trial within walls thicker than her alibi. Comments flooded with virtual hallelujahs. Still, a single DM slipped through. Unsigned. One deed down. Sister Glow. But the foundation still hides faults you never mapped. A chill snaked my spine. Threat or metaphor? Either way, I tasted copper again. Little later traced the message to an IP linked to a foreclosure firm eager for rezoned land. Stacy had been pawn, not queen. Someone larger still moved pieces across our board. Evening turned hospital windows into mirrors. My reflection showed a woman 5 decades past her prime, yet eyes alight like a tailor's lamp at midnight. I wheeled beside Damien, laid the golden-scarred cup on his tray. "Remember science fair?" I asked. "Jars labeled danger?" He nodded, smile twitching. "Well, baby, danger just mislabeled us." Time to correct the tag. Outside, thunder muttered distant intent. I leaned back, letting the hush settle, aware that Chapter 4 would demand more courage than needle or cane could supply. Somewhere beyond the parking deck, a silent investor tallied losses and plotted next moves. And if you lean close to the screen, you can almost hear the sound of a key turning in a lock we haven't yet discovered. Proof that the game is far from played, and the safest place for a queen might be the very center of the board. The first letter arrived before breakfast, slipped under the hospital room door like a paper serpent. No logo, no stamp, just a single sentence printed in courier font. A house is only valuable when it stands alone. Beneath it, a coordinate pair mapped to my old neighborhood, a fortune teller's wink at the land deal everyone thought finished. The message smelled of ink and oak sawdust, and it prickled my ruined left side with memories of blood-warm Georgia summers when Damien learned to ride his bike. I caught the screen of my phone reflecting the kintsugi mended teacup, and the thought surfaced. If gold can heal fractures, it can also call down lightning. The unseen buyer wanted more than Stacy's failed plot. He wanted the whole street razed, heritage mulched into parking lots, and greed, once denied its appetizer, often orders a main course without checking the price. Detective Little stationed 2 officers outside the room, yet my spine tingled whenever the elevator chimed. Reporters hammered the 4th floor lounge, convinced I would live stream again. But I'd learned something about anticipation. Leave an audience hungry long enough and they mistake scraps for feasts. So I let silence season the day while I planned the meal. At noon, a priest I didn't recognize appeared with a plastic communion kit. His collar was real, but the cross at his neck bore an engraving too fine for mass production. He asked to pray over Damien. My ears found the hum of a receiver in his pocket, mic live, frequency open. Instead of refusing, I invited him to lay hands on me first. As his palms grazed my shoulders, I whispered, Isaiah 54, verse 17, and felt the tremor in his fingers. No weapon forged against you shall prosper. He left without arguing, and the receiver's red light never flicked off until he disappeared past the vending machines. Hook. Soft as cat's paws on carpet, the enemy now wore shepherd's clothing. Night settled, lantern dim, and the hallway monitors threw phantom silhouettes across my bed. Damien slept restless, fists twitching at nightmares only morphine could chase. I scrolled public records until sunrise, tracing shell companies linked to the foreclosure firm. Every name splintered into 10 more, but all of them fed eventually into Magnus South Development LLC, a corporation chaired by one Lucas Vane, the man whose truck had once delivered Stacy to Valdosta. Greed, it seemed, had always driven the getaway car. By Dawn's pink confession, I'd booked a ride to Magnus South's downtown office. Nurse Patrice tried to block the wheelchair, citing my blood pressure and the cardiologist's instructions. I told her life comes with 2 clocks. One ticks under your ribs, the other over your head. Sometimes you chase the louder one. Just before leaving, I left the golden lace teacup on Damien's bedside tray, an anchor in case the tide washed me too far. When he opened his eyes and found it, he would know I'd gone to barter thunder for sunshine. Stay close, because the price of sunlight is often measured in shadows. The rideshare driver, a student with earbuds stitched permanently to his skull, asked no questions. He hummed trap beats while Atlanta blurred by, Buckhead boutiques, Midtown cranes clawing sky. I counted each passing block like stitches in a hem, steady, inevitable, necessary. Magnus South's lobby gleamed glass and steel, yet the receptionist's smile slid off when I introduced myself. Within minutes, 2 security guards flanked my chair, shepherding me to a conference room chilled enough to store secrets. Lucas Vane entered last, his suit charcoal, his eyes polished onyx. He carried no paper. Men like him own facts the way conquerors own maps. You should be resting, Mrs. Grace, he said, voice velvet over gravel. Your recovery impressed the city. Let me impress you in return with a generous offer for your property, now that your daughter-in-law's unfortunate actions rendered her stake void. He slid a folder across the table. 7 figures glittered on the top sheet, commas arranged like pearls. I closed the folder with 2 fingers. Your math ignores an inconvenient variable, I replied. Community heritage compounds interest the way rivers carve stone. My house isn't for sale. Vane's smile curdled. Everything is for sale, he said, temples pulsing. Ask Stacy. She already agreed to testify you coerced her into those ridiculous poison theatrics. Coerced. The word soured the air, but his next move soured it further. A security feed on the wall flickered to my ICU wing. Damien's bed empty, a timestamp only minutes old. Panic clawed my throat, then logic shoved back. Hallucination requires plausible set dressing, and Vane's details were too clean. I had him transferred, Vane lied smoothly. Your son's heart needs specialists in our private facility. Sign the deed, and he lives to inherit something more useful than your stubbornness. Cliffhanger disguised as negotiation, yet I could hear the false note. The hum behind the feed didn't match hospital monitors. The IV line on screen lacked Damien's identifier tag. They were playing highlights from hours earlier, slicing truth into weaponized montage. Pain ricocheted through my paralyzed arm, phantom or prophecy. I drew a breath seasoned with every choir song I'd ever sung and spoke with pulpit resonance. Let me tell you about sewing, Mr. Vane. A tailor can make seamless what others call impossible. Stitches hide inside folds where daylight never peeks, yet those hidden seams hold whole garments together. Lawyers are tailors of language. Detectives tailor evidence. You, sir, just stitched yourself into a suit you'll never escape. At that cue, Detective Lytle burst through the door with 2 federal marshals. My livestream camera, placed covertly in handbag lining, had been broadcasting the entire meeting. Thousands watched Vane confess to witness blackmail in real time. The chat scrolled like a revival tent. Amen, Sister Glow. Vane's security reached for sidearms, but marshals pinned them faster than knotting thread. As agents recited Miranda, Vane sneered at me. You can't prove I touched cyanide. No need, I answered. Your greed left fingerprints on everything money tried to bleach. The folder reopened under martial light. Bank transfers connecting Magnus South to the chemical supplier. Vane's signature glimmered there, bright as spilled mercury, evidence stitched from midnight research notarized at dawn. As they let him out, he spat a final curse. It slid off me like water off duck feathers. I had weathered storms that didn't fit in dictionaries. But triumph breeds aftershocks. Outside, clouds boiled black and sirens wailed toward the hospital. Victory suddenly tasted metallic. By the time the wheelchair van delivered me back to Greater Atlanta Medical, tornado sirens drowned traffic. Hallways buzzed with code triage. Nurse Patrice rushed up, wild-eyed. "Damien's fine," she shouted over the din, but the backup generator failed again. Somebody sabotaged the fuel line. In ICU, Damien sat propped, kintsugi cup in hand, smiling weakly when he saw me. "You brought the fight to them," he croaked, voice rough sandpaper. I kissed his forehead. "And now the fight's trying to steal the power that keeps hearts beating," I said. "We need light." Moments later, the hospital plunged into blackout, emergency LEDs casting demonic red. Ventilators kicked to battery. A child down the corridor cried for a nightlight that no longer existed. Amid the panic, a shadow figure dashed past carrying a gas can toward basement stairs, Vane's last paid pawn or a zealot worshipping prophet. Either way, darkness had found an evangelist. Adrenaline melted the borders of old age. I wheeled after him, arms thrusting, each push a prayer. Stairwell doors yawned, sucking wind. I braked at the top. The figure below splashed gasoline against the generator shell, flicked a lighter. The flame jittered, hungry. Hook buried mid-heartbeat. The smell of gasoline inherits every memory a house fire forgets. I gripped the handrail, forced my useless leg onto the first step, then the second. Pain detonated in hips, but gravity answered. Half fall, half crawl, I landed behind him as the lighter ignited. Instinct seized the teacup from my sling bag. I slammed gold-lace porcelain against his wrist. Ceramic burst, shards sparkling like meteor spray. Flame died. He spun, eyes furious, swinging the gas can. It connected with my shoulder. I crumpled, bones ringing like cracked crystal. But from the stairwell above boomed a shout, Damien barely strong enough to stand, yet wielding a metal IV pole like Gideon's trumpet. He charged. The attacker swung again, missed. The pole struck temple, man down. Gas can clanged, rolling. Damien dropped beside me, lungs wheezing. "Mom, we did it," he said between ragged breaths. I pressed a shard of the teacup into his palm, edges glowing with generator room light. "We're not broken, baby," I whispered. "We're reforged." Maintenance crew arrived. Patched the line, cranked the generator. Lights flickered back, brighter than forgiveness. Security cuffed the saboteur, an underling from Magnus South payroll. Nurse Patrice herded us onto gurneys, muttering about reckless seniors. In the ER bay, while medics bound my shoulder, news alerts pinged, Lucas Vane arrested, federal racketeering charges stacked, a class action forming by homeowners he'd targeted. Social feeds flooded with hashtag Kintsugi Justice emoji, golden cups over flame, resilience trending. Yet quiet found me only when storm sirens ceased. Rain sheeted hospital windows, washing footprints off asphalt. I imagined Stacy in county lockup hearing thunder like applause for a show she headlined, yet never understood. As dawn rinsed the sky, Damien dozed. I sat awake, slinged arm throbbing, studying the shard still wedged in my palm. Golden veins traced its fracture lines, proof that weakness, attended to with care, becomes art no thief can fence. And somewhere beyond corridors and courtrooms, a city stirred, aware that an old woman in a wheelchair had rolled the queen to the board's center and dared every pawn to block her. The courthouse smelled of pine sol and photocopied regret. Hardwood benches groaned beneath sermons they'd heard before, but today the pews held a different scripture, resilience stitched into bone. Reporters flanked the aisle like gladiators waiting for blood, their flashes cracking the air brighter than lightning. I wheeled past them, shoulder still nested in its sling, the shard of gold-laced porcelain tucked in my purse like a secret hymn book. Outside, autumn had finally bullied summer off the calendar. Sycamore leaves whirled in eddies, each one a colored summons to let dead weight drop. Yet even with wind chanting freedom, the question hummed beneath my ribs, could justice sound louder than scandal's echo? Damien walked beside me, slow but upright. 4-pole traded for a cane carved by his childhood pastor. The ivory handle curled like a shepherd's crook, a reminder that lost sheep sometimes rescue their flock. Inside courtroom B, Lucas Vane sat at the defense table, cuffs glinting. He looked smaller without his sharkskin armor, as though greed itself had been inflating him all along. Stacy occupied the witness box, orange jumpsuit draining her complexion of ambition. Her eyes found me, flicked away, then flicked back. Hunger wrapped in apology, the expression of a gambler who has just realized the house never loses. She mouthed something I couldn't catch. Confession or curse, the glass between us devoured it whole. Judge Brewer, a woman whose gavel strokes could reorder planets, called the docket racketeering, attempted murder by proxy, conspiracy, sabotage of medical infrastructure. Each count landed like a drumbeat, marching us toward a verdict nobody dared breathe yet. The prosecutor, Ms. Valdez, opened with photographs of the cracked teacup, its veins gilded by kintsugi. She didn't explain the art. She let the jury see beauty mended from violence, hoping they would understand the metaphor without footnotes. My turn on the stand came after lunch. Bailiff adjusted the microphone, but my voice filled the room before amplification. Rough silk, unwavering. I told them how peach pie sweetness can hide strychnine bitterness, how a stroke can paralyze limbs but galvanize purpose, how a deed isn't just ink on county parchment, but a covenant between generations. I recounted the night of the tea, the basement chase, the gasoline glinting like liquid sin, and when Missy Valdez asked why I'd risk my broken body against an arsonist, I answered with the most dangerous truth. Because love is a kind of fire, too, and it burns hotter than fear. The defense cross-examined with barbed questions. Why live stream? Why play detective? Wasn't I manipulating public sentiment to inflate property value? I met every prick with measured calm. A seamstress knows tension, I said. Pull the thread too hard and fabric rips, pull too soft and stitches fall out. All I did was hold the tension until truth could knot itself. As I rolled back to my seat, I caught the jury's faces, a quilt of empathy, skepticism, awe. Doubt still lingered in a few eyes. Doubt Vane's attorney would try to feed with poisoned spoonfuls. But a mother recognizes hunger. Those jurors weren't starving for loopholes. They wanted a meal that filled. Outside, thunder grumbled, though the forecast promised clear skies. I closed my eyes and felt the electric charge thread its way through the building's copper bones. Some storms arrive wearing robes instead of clouds, and their rain falls in verdicts, not drops. Hold tight. Lightning likes to revisit the tallest truth. Closing arguments spilled over into twilight. Valdez drew a map of Greed's pipeline from Stacy's forged wire transfers to Vane's shell companies. Each money trail a sewer gurgling beneath our city's polished sidewalks. She ended by lifting the teacup shard with latexed fingers, letting courtroom lights shimmer along its golden scar. Broken, she told the jury, is not the same as finished. Defense counsel swung for sympathy, painting Stacy as collateral damage of Vane's empire, and Vane as entrepreneur punished for ambition. They invoked market forces, eminent domain, even scripture about talents multiplied. But every verse warped until it sounded like brass instruments played underwater. When the jury retired, an anvil of stillness settled. Damien's hand found my uninjured one. "Whatever they decide," he whispered, "the worst is behind us." His voice carried conviction, yet his pulse jittered like a snare drum. Courage often borrows its costume from fear, hoping no one checks the hemline. 2 hours later, the jury foreman returned, verdict envelope trembling. Judge Brewer unfolded it with care as though mishandling could change the ink. On count 1, guilty. On count 2, moment suspended. Heartbeat, ceiling fan, history all holding breath, guilty. On counts 3 and 4, guilty. A collective exhale swept the gallery, half cheer, half prayer. Stacy bowed her head, either in shame or relief that someone had finally stopped a runaway train. Vane stared at me as marshals cuffed him anew, hatred hollowing his pupils. But I saw something else tucked behind the glare. Bewilderment that money couldn't bribe physics, that gravity pulled diamonds and dirt with equal fidelity. Yet even victory casts a shadow. Judge remanded Stacy for psychiatric evaluation before sentencing. Valdez advised restorative justice, citing letters Stacy wrote from jail, apologies laced with self-pity but also genuine dread of the person she'd become. Brewer scheduled a hearing, leaving the storyline dangling like a spool with thread still uncut. Outside, reporters mobbed. Cameras begged for one more viral soundbite. I lifted the teacup shard, now set into a pendant by a jeweler friend, and said only, "Let every fracture tell its story." Then I wheeled through the gauntlet into rain that had finally earned its right to fall. That night, Atlanta slept beneath a waxing moon polished by storm runoff. Community members organized a block party fundraiser, raising banners that read, "Keep Magnolia Drive Ours." Strangers offered pro bono labor to repair my century-old porch, board by board. Gold paint shimmered on every new nailhead, tiny kintsugi constellations warding off future cracks. Yet as music drifted from radios and barbecue smoke braided the night, I sensed an unfinished chord vibrating somewhere beyond the wood smoke halo. Not fear, more like the after-image of lightning behind closed eyes. Perhaps it was hope making its own thunder, or perhaps justice's echo, measuring distance to its next destination. What do we do with a life after it's been reforged? Live it? Or fear its next fracture? Winter arrived early, frosting magnolia leaves with sugar crust. 6 weeks had filed courthouse edges smooth. Sentencing day dawned crisp, merciless. Brewer handed Vane 30 years, Stacy 10, 5 in facility rehab, 5 probation with community service teaching elder care basics. My testimony during that phase surprised many. I requested leniency, rooted not in pity but in math. Punishment multiplies pain, I argued. Restoration multiplies value. The judge amended counseling hours accordingly, and for once a gavel sounded less like an ending than a metronome to guide new measures. The house on Magnolia Drive became an unofficial museum of resilience. School children toured my sewing studio to learn kintsugi, each left with a broken and mended button as talisman. Damien organized a neighborhood co-op, turning vacant lots into gardens nourished by compost of old broker flyers. Where Vane envisioned asphalt, tomatoes now climbed trellises, each fruit a small red defiance. On the first spring morning, Stacy's mother visited, wringing hands, eyes brimming. She thanked me for not letting bitterness drown the girl she once rocked to sleep. We sat on the porch drinking peach tea, safe again, while cardinals debated theology in the dogwood. Pain fluttered in my shoulder, but it had learned to whisper instead of scream. Healing, I discovered, isn't silence, but harmony. That night, I live-streamed for the last time. No dramatic hook, no urgent whisper, just porch swing creaks and cicadas tuning up. Viewers expected closure. Unaware closure is an author's lie. Real life prefers ellipses. I told them so, then lifted the mended cup, its gold veins catching moonlight like harvest fireflies. If your story feels cracked, I said, pour something warm into the break and watch what spills out. It might be poison, yes, but it might also be the medicine someone else needs. Comments scrolled hearts and hallelujahs. I signed off, closed the app, placed the phone face down. Inside, Damien practiced piano, left hand still clumsy from smoke inhalation, right hand sure. Each note stumbled, stood, then grew wings. I listened until melody stitched itself smooth. Later, in the quiet ink hour before dawn, a breeze teased open the study window. Papers fluttered. Blueprints of community gardens, court transcripts, medical bills marked paid in full by anonymous donors. On one sheet, a quote I'd scrawled months ago stared back. Every seam holds a secret, but the secret is never the thread. It's the hands that guide the needle. I smoothed the page flat, pressed the golden pendant to the ink, felt warmth radiate as if the words recognized their twin. Somewhere beyond the glass, another story cracked open, begging gold, and I, old, mended, unafraid, reached for my thimble.